Senator the Honorable Dr. Amery Browne, Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, Your Excellency Dr. Paul Byam, Director of Bilateral Relations, colleagues from the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, members of the viewing public, members of the media, good morning. Welcome to this morning's media conference, during which the Minister will provide insight and information on Trinidad and Tobago's work and accomplishments in the multilateral arena, the most recent of which is the election by acclamation of His Excellency Dennis Francis, Trinidad and Tobago's permanent representative to the United Nations in New York, as the President of the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Other elements of the multilateral engagement by Trinidad and Tobago will also be shared during the media conference. And with that brief introduction, I invite the Minister to address you. Thank you.
Thank you, PS. Good morning to the members of staff, directors, Ambassador Byam present, members of the media, and by extension, national community, ladies and gentlemen. On Thursday, the 1st of June, 2023, at approximately 10 minutes past 10 in the morning, history was made for Trinidad and Tobago with the election for the first time of a son of our soil, Ambassador Dennis Francis, as the President of the United Nations General Assembly for the 78th session, which runs from 2023 to 2024. This is the first time that Trinidad and Tobago has mounted a candidature for this very prestigious position. This is the first time that we have held a position at such a level. This represents the success and achievement of a major foreign policy objective of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. This represents the achievement of one of our major foreign policy objectives, which is to position Trinidad and Tobago in leadership situations in international organizations. The United Nations General Assembly being one such premier position, we are now holding the presidency. Added to that, the election of Ambassador Francis was by acclamation, which means that in the end, Trinidad and Tobago's candidature was unopposed. That is very significant, and that is not something to be taken for granted, because up to 48 hours before such an election, a member state can float a candidacy. That did not happen on this occasion, and I want to credit the hardworking staff of the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs and their very strategic and focused diplomacy in ensuring that our campaign was successful, was smooth, and resulted in the desired outcomes. This positions Trinidad and Tobago in a very unique situation for the next year until the year 2024, because we will now be chairing, Ambassador Francis will be chairing High-Level Week. All meetings of the General Assembly will be setting the theme for meetings, will be arranging summits and seminars, and will be steering the work of the General Assembly for the next year. This puts the profile of our country at a level that it's never been before in our history. We see this as an opportunity for additional gains in the foreign policy sphere. We have additional objectives, which I'll be sharing with you in the near future. This presidency is a platform for us to showcase the best attributes of Trinidad and Tobago, the leadership capabilities of Trinidad and Tobago and will position us for additional successes in the near future. This is a journey that did not begin yesterday, and our membership of the United Nations has been now of 60 years duration, and over those years we have built a very strong and credible profile, all of which has contributed to the success of this important candidature. We've had many distinguished sons and daughters of our soil that have served the UN system and served at high levels in other international organizations. I can give a few examples because it's on those shoulders that we now stand, and it's on that platform that Ambassador Francis was able to advance so successfully. So we can talk about persons like Lennox Fitzroy Bala, a former permanent secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs back in those days, who was acclaimed globally and who was one of the founding fathers of the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, and contributed significantly to national, regional, and global efforts in that arena. We could talk about Sir Ellis Clarke. We can talk about A.N.R. Robinson, who is widely recognized as one of the architects of the International Criminal Court. So this is not a journey that began yesterday. Trinidad and Tobago has always punched above its weight class in the international arena. But this was a special punch and a special achievement. And I could also mention not Sir as yet, Justice Anthony Lucky, a real mentor of mine, who remains a source of advice and inspiration to this ministry and to this minister, and who was, again, has made significant contributions over the years on the international stage. So this success comes after 60 years of strategic involvement at the United Nations. I want to tell you a little bit more about Ambassador Francis, because you've heard some things over the last few days. I wanted to give you a little bit of a different perspective. I see the success of this son of the soil as an important example and inspiration to young men and young women in our country today. Ambassador Francis is now at the pinnacle. He was not born with a golden spoon in his mouth. He's from right here in Bossier Village, the son of a carpenter. His mother was a homemaker. Very humble beginnings. He did not attend a fancy prestige school. He attended a good school, Woodbrook Government Secondary, and progressed from there. He went to Polytechnic. So these are not what might be regarded as glamorous roots, but I can tell you they were substantial roots. And in speaking to Ambassador very frequently over the last few months, he described to me that he had a choice to make. And it's a choice that many young people have to make today, and to choose a path of dedication, determination, sacrifice, application. Whatever you do, do it to the very best of your ability. Those are the choices that Dennis Francis made. And it took him from the streets of Bossier and Woodbrook Government Secondary to the presidency of the United Nations General Assembly, proudly wearing the badge and carrying the identity of Trinidad and Tobago. If that is not a good example to the young men and young women of this country, I don't know what is. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a different perspective, because sometimes we see accomplishments, we see achievements, and we don't realize the type of sacrifice and the type of legacy that would have gone into such a pathway. The other perspective I want to share with you is that the campaign is one element, but the period of service, the tenure of service, will be another. And the government of Trinidad and Tobago is fully committed to providing all of the requisite support to ensure that the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly and Ambassador Francis's leadership will stand out as a positive example of a small nation contributing on a big stage. So we live in difficult times. I don't need to elaborate on that. There are conflicts in several parts of the world that are attracting the attention of the United Nations, and rightfully so. The world is very much polarized, and it's a very difficult environment to elaborate leadership at any level, far less to lead the discussions at the United Nations General Assembly. But it is our belief that our son of the soil has all of the attributes required. And those attributes are: he's a strong communicator, he's very skilled at building consensus and building bridges, he is an excellent negotiator and skilled at finding areas of compromise between positions that might be far apart. He's also very good at identifying prospects for forward momentum, even when there are sticky and challenging topics that can obstruct progress. Those are the types of attributes that will be instrumental in ensuring the success of this 78th session. And it's not just about the ambassador himself. I want to underscore in this success the role of Team Trinidad and Tobago. It began in 2013 when a placeholder was marked by our team in New York at our permanent mission in New York, which basically identified that Trinidad and Tobago is signaling an interest in a campaign in 2023, for the 2023 period. And then in 2021, myself, as a fairly new Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, took a note to our cabinet which achieved the approval of Trinidad and Tobago's candidature. So in 2021, that represented the first time, to my information, that the cabinet of this country approved a candidature for the presidency of the General Assembly. The cabinet also approved at that stage the candidate. And this candidate, he didn't fall from the sky, was a result of some careful research and examination. The idea was to find our best and brightest, the most suitable possible national of this country would have to be identified to serve at this position, because those are the antecedents for success. I want to credit the permanent secretary and her team in participating in that scan of the landscape and the identification of the best possible candidate. This was not automatic. If you look at the candidatures of other countries over the years for the presidency of the General Assembly, many of them have been ministers of foreign affairs and other types of personalities. We took a different approach, and we identified our most experienced, most skilled diplomat for this candidature. I believe that was a key ingredient to our ultimate success. So Cabinet approved the candidate. And in 2021, Cabinet also approved the campaign. This was not just naming someone and sitting back. A lot of work has occurred, and I will give you some of the steps in detail that contributed to this particular success. So it really was about teamwork here at headquarters And also, at our overseas missions, I want to identify the staff of our permanent mission to the United Nations in New York. A very unique team that I've gotten to know quite well over the last year or so. Very diverse, very reflective. I've met all the teams at the UN. I'm proud to say that Trinidad and Tobago's team of diplomats is probably the most diverse of any country at the United Nations. Well reflective of our rainbow nation. Very hardworking, very patriotic, and they helped carry this success as well. I want to salute them. So I gave you some of the steps: the approval of the campaign strategy, the approval of the candidate, and then in February of this year, we achieved the key milestone, which is the endorsement of GRULAC. GRULAC is a group of Latin American and Caribbean states at the United Nations. We achieved the written endorsement of GRULAC, and then we knew we were well on our way. That occurred on the 28th of February, 2023. With that, we went into high gear. So I went up to New York. I met with the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres. I met with the chair of the Group of 77, the G77. Also met with a range of top diplomats accompanied by Ambassador Francis, who was our candidate. Every single meeting this ministry has participated in, we have raised this candidature. We've asked for support across the board. The Foreign Minister of Japan was here in Port of Spain a couple months ago. That was one of the key agenda items. I met with the Foreign Minister of Korea in Guatemala recently. That was one of the key agenda items. Met with Secretary of State Blinken, Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom. This was a key agenda item. Our team at the permanent mission in New York met with all the regional groupings. All the regional groupings. This was a thorough effort. An interactive dialogue was arranged with Secretary General Guterres, where the influential diplomats were able to have an interaction with our candidate. We dispatched diplomatic notes to all the foreign ministries. I'm just giving you the key steps of the work that went into this success. Diplomatic notes were also dispatched to the foreign missions that are located here in Port of Spain. We hosted a campaign launch in New York. That's the famous one where the doubles were shared, and like some people here didn't like that. How could you not like that? Showcasing the beautiful culture of our country. Anyway, I'll talk more about that on another occasion. So we did a successful campaign launch. We then had a forum here in Port of Spain at Napa, where we invited all of the ambassadors, all of the high commissioners, all of the diplomats located in Port of Spain to this forum. We had a big screen with Ambassador Francis himself doing a video presentation, introducing himself, talking to these diplomats. The power of persuasion. We had another reception in New York this week to culminate the campaign, where myself and Ambassador were able to thank various countries and groupings for their support, remind them that the election is tomorrow. This was Wednesday night, and again soliciting their full support for Trinidad and Tobago. All of this culminated election by acclamation at 10 minutes past 10 on Thursday, June 1st. Just to put a few historical facts into place, election by acclamation is not automatic. And there's a saying that I've shared with a few persons. Let me just put the fact on the record first. In 2018, within GRULAC, there was a contested election for the presidency of the General Assembly. That involved Honduras and Ecuador. That's a historical fact. That created ripples which exist to this day. I wouldn't get into the particulars today. That created ripples that demanded the skill of our diplomats to ensure that what happened back then would not affect Trinidad and Tobago's success today. As recently as 2021, there was a contested election for the presidency of the General Assembly that involved the Maldives and Afghanistan. And in both of those cases, both of those examples, placeholders were laid years before. And guess what? Near the end, another country would have arisen, would have launched a candidate, would have launched a campaign, and interestingly, in both cases, the latter offerings succeeded, notwithstanding the placeholder that was laid. We could not afford that to happen as a small state being exposed in this campaign. And as I discussed with Prime Minister, the only option for us in this matter was success. Thanks to the team effort, we were able to achieve exactly that. International work, failure is never anonymous. Failure is never anonymous. And therefore, when we succeed, we should all be proud and celebrate our success as well. So I've given you a few examples. I again want to salute our successful candidate, the president-elect, to reassure him, the national community, that the full weight of the government and the people of Trinidad and Tobago are behind him, behind his team, because Trinidad and Tobago is now being profiled. Our national brand is now being showcased to the world in a way that it never has been before, and at a level that should make us all extremely proud. I also want to share a few comments about the upcoming 50th anniversary celebration of CARICOM, which would occur right here in Trinidad and Tobago, and which is demanding the energy and attention of this ministry at this time in the planning cycle. I will now share with you a few comments on the 50th anniversary. CARICOM this year celebrates its 50th birthday. Those of you who've been on the planet that long would know 50th anniversary. 50th birthday is a golden birthday, and CARICOM intends to use this event to celebrate our accomplishments, to reflect on our past and some of the challenges we have experienced, and also as a moment of introspection for the future, for the next 50 years of CARICOM. So Trinidad and Tobago was the birthplace of the Caribbean community. The Treaty of Chaguaramas was signed right here by 4 leaders: Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Eric Williams; Guyana, Forbes Burnham; Barbados, Errol Barrow; and Jamaica, Manley, Norman Manley. Here we are 50 years later. We have a new roster of leadership, all of whom will be gathered here, back at the birthplace, this July 2023, from the 1st to the 5th of July. The official meeting of heads and celebration will occur from the 3rd to the 5th of July, and on the 1st and the 2nd, we will have some sporting celebration. There will be street races and other elements that we are planning, along with the CARICOM Secretariat, that will help to mobilize and inspire the population, involve young people, some of our athletes. There's a strong road running culture in this country and in the region. So there will be races in Port of Spain and also to Chaguaramas. And then from the 3rd to the 5th, we will have the heads of government meeting and the celebration. So what we are planning is that we would utilize Chaguaramas. We have to have a commemoration in Chaguaramas itself, but the main venue for the heads meeting will be at the Hyatt Hotel in Port of Spain. We'll have our plenary sessions. The heads of government will have their caucus sessions at the Hyatt. But on the morning of the 4th of July, which is the day of that very special anniversary, we will have some very touching and special commemorations occurring in Chaguaramas itself. I will be able to fill you in with some more details in the very near future in this regard. Some of our objectives would be to involve our young people and children in this celebration, to ensure it's not just a Ministry of Foreign Affairs and diplomats' agenda, but the national community could be mobilized and involved. We will have displays at the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, at the Rotunda, and other key locations in San Fernando, in Tobago as well. We will be bringing some special guests in collaboration with the CARICOM Secretariat and the other heads of government. Some special guests will be here. You will hear more about that in the near future. We will have a gala concert as well, showcasing the best of Trinidad and Tobago's beautiful culture, as well as the culture of our region, because this is not just a Trinidad and Tobago show. Now, bear in mind that the chair of this meeting will not be Trinidad and Tobago. It's being hosted here, and normally the chair hosts, or the host chairs. In this case, the incoming chair will be Dominica, but the decision was made by CARICOM to host this meeting here in Trinidad and Tobago. So this is just an alert to the media, to the national community. That first week of July is going to be very, very special for us. And we will seek to transform the airport. We will seek to transform some of our key road arteries, especially that road to Chaguaramas, and make it a CARICOM ethos. The idea being to just remind people of the value of this regional community and to inspire further involvement and energy for the next 50 years to come. So that's just a little sample of what we have in store for the 50th anniversary and the 45th meeting of the Conference of Heads of Government of the Caribbean Community. And as I said, we anticipate some very high-profile special guests to be with us for that particular anniversary. Again, the floor is open. One of the, I'll just float this with you, one of our objectives as well, our sub-objectives, is to explore the possibility of utilizing silent fireworks as a pilot here in Port of Spain. Silent fireworks, it's something that I know a number of members of the national community have been talking about and advocating for. We are doing our best to deploy same in this celebration. Maybe it could be an example for future celebrations as well. So the floor is open if there are any questions that you would wish to ask on this particular limb. Okay, well, I guess it was crystal clear. In ending, I just want to make a few comments about this success and the coming success of our hosting of the 50th anniversary celebration. As Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, I want to point acknowledgement in two directions. One is internally to this ministry and its staff. None of these successes could have been achieved without the highest degree of teamwork, best guidance, and strategic involvement of some of the more experienced members of our team here. I want to acknowledge that fully and frontally. And none of this could have been achieved without the support of the Prime Minister and the Cabinet of this country. I heard Dr. Rowley, I was still in New York, I heard him at a public meeting referencing that he was a little hesitant when this presidency campaign was brought to him. I just want to credit the Prime Minister. That hesitation was very brief, and as usual, if he has a preconceived notion, the Prime Minister has been very amenable to the right type of persuasion and advocacy. And once I was able to convince him that we have an excellent chance of bringing this home, everything else was full support. And that has been instrumental in ensuring that we can conduct a campaign of the highest standard, and that we can mount a presidency of the highest standard. We fully believe that's what this country deserves, and that's what it will get. Again, this is an accomplishment of one of our major foreign policy priorities. The entire nation should be duly proud of a former young diplomat, risen through the ranks, Dennis Francis, and the teamwork that has resulted in this success. Thank you very much.